Hi, my name is Mark, and I'm going to guide you to the process of my steampunk pirates painting. So I start with a really rough black and white thumbnail sketch, what I created with only soft brushes in about half an hour. And as a first step, I starting to add some colors to establish the general mood of the whole painting. For this, I'm using a color layer and basically just picking up colors and blocking them in a soft brush. I wanted to create two major lights, one desaturated cold light from the right side and an orange light from the left. So after this really quick process, I'm going in and cleaning up the sketch. So I'm basically doing like a layer separation. What you can see now is I'm painting in the really far background, the sky and the ocean, and then I cutting out parts from the color sketch and copy pasting it back onto new layers and also adding new ones. This is a really helpful process because if I'm doing large scale environments, I always like to separate the different space segments. It really gives me the chance to easily make corrections, and what is really important is to it's much easier to add aerial perspective this way between the layers like moist and air. So I'm doing exactly the same thing with the ship as well. Just cut it up roughly. As you can see, I'm adding a bit more detail as well to all the layers. So I'm trying to adjust it um, to the color schemes and lighting schemes what I established. I'm always going from the background, starting with the background and going towards the foreground. It's just much easier for me. It's probably because I'm coming from a traditional background, and I work exactly the same way with oils and acrylics. As you can see, I'm also adding uh, some textures and always naming the layers as well. It's just I wasn't disorganized always, but I realized it's just fastens up my workflow. And as a production artist, sometimes I have to pass on my PSD files, my work files to other artists, and it's just much easier to them to follow my work and to if I'm working with a really organized layer structure. Um, Now I'm working on the background, but I'm working without the characters first. I know I'm gonna cover most of this part with the characters, especially the left side, uh, but because this is going to be my main focal point, um, I would like to figure out how how is it built exactly, how does it look like exactly, even without the characters, and it's just much easier to establish the lights as well. Uh, as you can see, the middle ground I added another level, what is basically like an extra story element, and I always jumping back and forward between the original sketch and my more advanced sketch. So what I'm doing now is adding houses and trying to connect basically the foreground with the middle ground with the bay where the ship is. So I imagine there's like a whole pass uh, through the forest between the village and the terrace and the harbor. I'm doing exactly the same with my characters. I'm blocking them in. So these gonna be my main heroes, my pirates. One of them is the young captain, and the other is his best mate, probably his first lieutenant. And then the pirates just arrived from their journey and resting and celebrating all their big adventures. So um, I'm not really focusing any small details now. Just trying to establish the main lights, the main shadows on the characters as well. But of course, I'm I'm bouncing around ideas about their costume, uh, their weapons, the mechanical arm of the captain, and so on and so on. I added this guy to on the left and the robot. Sorry, the guy on the right and the robot on the left to strengthen the perspective. So basically, the guy on the right frames the whole scene and adds another level of space, and the robot uh, gives us sort of a secondary focal point between the guys and the ship. And the robot chameleon up here, serves exactly the same purpose. It's basically simply a composition element which leads our eyes back to the characters. So the characters are a starting point compositionally, that's our main focal point. And we can go down on the stairs as a viewer and at their ship and go back to the chameleon and go back to the characters again. So that's the main reason. So now I'm adding extra palm trees between the various space segments. Um, it's basically just another extra element to give another level of space. So I'm the only thing I'm doing here is trying to play with the background, midground, foreground thing, but between between the background and midground there is also another space, or I can break up even the midground into 2, 3, 4 separate elements. So at this point I'm already starting the detailing, and I'm doing exactly the same process. So starting with the background. First I added some stars to the sky because I wanted to open up the sky and not just cover it with clouds. So it's partly clear sky with a couple of clouds. I added some clouds with a texture brush, and then I'm starting detailing. So I'm trying to keep in mind how the light reacts with the clouds, and so the moonlight is coming from the left side, and so the upper left side of the clouds is going to be lighter, and the lower right is darker because that's the shadowy part. As you can see, I'm also using selections with a simple lasso tool that really helps me to control my edges, to use soft and hard edges and give them variety. And then now I'm moving further and start to detail out the mountains. So here at the mountains, the most important part is the silhouette of the hills and mountains and rocks. So I'm trying to add a feel of a jungle. So adding palm trees and what are poking out from the main forest, and also um, and also adding a sort of a textury feel to the whole thing. I don't really want to add much detail here because it's so far away that and it's a night scene, so there isn't much light in the shadows. You we can't really see much just in the areas lit by the moonlight. But still, I want to suggest the feel of the amount of detail what could be there. So basically, I'm just trying to fake the whole thing. Um, it's not because I don't want to work on it. I'd love to, but it's just absolutely unnecessary because those are not my focal points, and my eyes is gonna fill out the missing details if I handle the focal point right later. So I'm moving further to the midground. As you can see, I switched off the ship layer. I want to keep that for later because I really would like to sort out the background first, and the ship is really a key element in this illustration. So I really want to keep close attention to that. Now just blocking in trees, painting them over, erasing them back. I'm using a couple of palm tree brushes downloaded somewhere from the internet, and but always painting them over a bit and erasing them back. So I'm using it like kind of a texture, um, and trying to keep in mind all the light sources what I use. Um, with this one, with these houses with the small lights added to the background, I suggest there are other houses on the other side in the jungle, and not just a plain deserted island. So as you can see, I'm moving forward to the middle ground, and what I mentioned before, I imagine there is this path through the forest. What brings us through this slum typey village up to the mountaintop, to the hilltop, uh, where the pirates are, or where our main scene is. Um, at this point, I'm pretty much working with the colors, what I blocked in at the first part, but I'm trying to add as much detail as possible and figure out all the structure elements. So this is what I'm working now is what I call a candy spot, what is not really a part of my main focal point, but it really adds to the story. So that's why I added this pool scene where probably the girlfriends of the pirates are just hanging out and swimming in the pool, etc. And to add these small details to the story really adds life to your illustration. So I would highly suggest to add something special to everything. The key point is the story in every illustration. You have to tell a story even with I don't know, with a stair, how you age a stair or whatever. So I imagine this pool, and as this is a steampunk world, I imagine there are huge engines and these bulky tanks. Um, so all these huge machinery are just because of the pool, just to heat it up, and and the pool is, if you think about it, is really a luxury in an island because um, the the sweet water is really a precious thing on every island. So I had these girls and pipes and small chimneys, and like folding beach beds, small tables to them, a couple of glasses, champagne glasses with a bucket, and so on. So all these small details are. I like the candies for the viewer, because if you look at the illustration first, you're not really seeing it because that's not the focal point. But later you can, if you recognize it, then that's the point where you say, oh man, it's cool. So moving forward to the real foreground, and using the selection tool again to have really sharp edges for the stairs and for the fence and the whole terrace. So this is the point where we can actually see a really sharp perspective. So I have to be really careful with this. And this is the point where I can play with more saturated warm, with my more saturated warm light source and the other bluish colored light source of light from the moon. So slowly resizing, and as you see, I'm playing around with the characters, not much, but just in terms of size, how they actually, where they actually go. Playing around with the proportions to find how exactly it's going to look like. And this last step is basically like a texture work. Because I wanted to create more like a cartoony feel. If you read the article, you know that. More in the vein of the old school Monkey Island games. So that's why I didn't really wanted to use any textures. So I'm trying to paint everything in, but for this I don't really need that much details. So I just want to suggest that it's wood, and this level of detail is pretty much enough. What I'm doing now is adding the small details are really important. So you have to find a balance between the small stuff, the really small details, and bigger, more plain areas. That's a really delicate balance. So I'm adding these details to suggest that this whole terrace belongs to the pirates. First, I wanted to do some kind of a metal fence similar to the Parisian balconies, but then I decided, oh no, it's do more like a, because it doesn't really match to the Caribbean feeling. Do more like a wood carved small skulls of pirate skulls. And here I'm adding back the paper lamps what I had in the color sketch. What gives me another nice light source to spice up this foreground area. Well, yeah, I think it's pretty much ready. So I'm gonna move to the characters soon. I think a bit of extra detail, and I think it's a nice touch to add this type of things like a school on the paper lamps. So much trying to match everything to your story. Sometimes I'm jumping back and forward to balance out the amount of details of the various space segments. Adding another level of reflections with sharper edges. Some reflections to the water and to the beach. I also wanted to show this whole terrace is just on the edge of the nature, just on the edge of the jungle. So I did these veins and leaves. Okay, I pretty much finished the layer separation again, so this is the time to start the actual fine detailing. So I'm going back to the ship, and now I'm really just focusing on that. First, I'm painting the what is below the sea. So just to suggest, there are also lamps, and there's like a belly on the ship. I imagine that they are the main cabins and corners. I tried to design a really steampunk ship, but I wanted to go. So I wanted to do something like Captain Nemo's ship, but a bit more, but with a bit more up-to-date design. And I didn't want to overuse the typical steampunky materials because I don't think that really does match to the pirates, because somehow the brass and gold and really intricate details um, suggest more richness to me. So I wanted to do a ship with more rusty metal surfaces, but still make it look a bit Victorian. So it's definitely a submarine, and I imagine that it has three major parts. The first is the bottom part, where all the cabins are. The second one is the front with the loading bay and the main bridge, and with a huge cannon on top. And the third one is the back with the engine. On this final step, I added a bunch of rust, like this browny grunge, to make it more worn, to make it look more worn. There's also a fourth part, what is on the top right, and that's the room of the captain, like a panorama room or something. Yeah, and I call it Rusty Rat. You can't really see that on the final illustration because this is so small. I'm about I think on 100. I'm painting that on 100% now. Zoomed on 100%. So if I zoom out, you won't really notice this rusty red, but I know it's there, and if anybody notices it, that's cool. And the last part is adding the reflections to the border. If you're adding reflections like that, well, with mirroring the object, be careful because you can't really see the same thing from on the reflection. So that's why I cut it out, parts from the top and distorted it back. I'm adding here some extra elements because I imagine they are servicing the ship and loading it out. So, and it's always good to add small elements what gives us a sense of scale. So that's why I added the humans, and even they are just patches. They are our mind is instantly recognized them as humans doing something. So I can compare the size of the ship to the humans instantly. And or secondary focal point is the robot. So with the design of the robot, I wanted to do something. I mean, I imagine in a steampunk world, it's probably the privates on the ship are robots, of course. So robots are washing the dishes. Robots are doing the shitty jobs, and carrying the boxes around. So this is that kind of maintenance robot, the average robot what works on the ship, and he brings us probably boxes of booze up to the pirates' party. I wanted to avoid to use really sci-fi shapes on the robot, even if it's a robot. So that's why I'm painting big shoulder pads and huge hands to have to not just have a bit old school feel, but also keep the cartoony things, cartoony feel, cartoony style. And now I'm jumping back to my main dudes. So as you can see, I already redesigned the head a bit. I wasn't really satisfied with the hairstyle. I wanted to go more towards an early 20th century, so 1900 something's hairstyle and this side beard, and yeah, but I wanted to keep him young, so I added this hat and these typical steampunk goggles. I'm jumping back and forward, zooming in and out at this stage because I'm also finalizing the proportions of the characters and the colors, and to actually see the true. I don't really want to zoom in. So as you're gonna see, I only zoom in um, really close when I'm doing the small detailing. Yeah. And all the other times I'm zooming out because I want to see the whole image, because I want to develop the whole image together. So yeah, I'm adding this pistol to his belt, all the small accessories. Um, I'm slowly sorting out his main costume, his main parts of the costume, and adjusting it to all the light sources, what are around them. The main light source from the right, the moonlight from their back, and the greenish light of their weird drinks. So I'm doing the same process with the fat guy, trying to figure out his costume properly, and also adding the lights, changing his proportions, his silhouette. This is the point where I figure out all the main design elements of my main scene, the characters. The gun is also a really important part. All the steampunk elements is really important at this stage, because to actually show that is happening in a steampunk world, you can do two things. You can focus on the real on the accessories like guns, the belts, the goggles, etc., and like and also big things like the ships, and especially here because we are on a Caribbean island, so I can't really show huge buildings and factories with pipes, etc. So I wanted to mix these two because I thought it could be really interesting. because you are not really used to seeing steampunk things outside of a really steampunk city. And the other things, not just the robot, but the bird, is going to serve exactly the same purpose, because it's going to be a robot bird. First, I thought it could be uh, to have a parrot for one of the guys, and I thought, oh, but that should be a robot as well, of course, as we are in steampunk world. So if their pirates are robot, then their birds definitely should be a robot. So, and now what you see now is I'm adding these shadows, these casted shadows, to the ground. That that helps to sell that there's also a world outside what we see, and we are not just seeing an image, but we just peeking into this different world. And this chameleon is exactly the same like the bird. I don't want to spend too much time on this one. I mean the chameleon, but still it has to be right in terms of the lighting and reflections and shadows, and it's absolutely outside the focal point, so it doesn't need as much detail as my characters. So I probably won't gonna go back to it, but bit of adjustments, characters, adding some lights, some extra lights on a colored edge layer. And now, as you can see, I flipped the image. It really helps to see all the faults, because after a while your mind just somehow gets comfortable with what you see, and you can't really see the faults, especially in the perspective. So I switched the image, flattened down the whole background except the ship, and as you can see, I with a free transform and grabbed the whole thing, distorted it a bit to match the perspective. I'm doing exactly the same thing with the ship, and then now everything seems fine, and I'm going back and correcting the horizon line, just to. And I'm doing the same thing with the foreground, just turning it over, slightly distorting it, just to match to my new perspective. These are really small adjustments, but really helpful. And now what you see is I'm doing the same process, just with the liquify tool on the characters. The liquify tool is really helpful to move around body proportions and to quickly change the body shape of a final character, or sort of even sort of final character. Just this, you always have to go back and fix the smudged painting parts. And now I start the really fine detailing with the characters. This is, I think, if I check the overall process, this is the longest one from all the parts that I've done. So it took me, I think, about 15 hours, 14 hours from scratch to finish this image, and I think I spent about 5 hours. So yeah, about 1/3 of the whole process just on the 2 characters. It's simply because I know this whole piece is mainly an environment piece, but without these two characters, it would be just simply lifeless. So these two characters are the main thing in this image, and if I don't detail them out properly, uh, then there is just no point to finish the whole image. This is my main focal point. This is my main story, my main two guys, and I also have to tell the story with their costumes. So that's why I added the scarf to add a bit of exclusivity or something to the captain. The scarf pin with the skull. And as you notice, I also changed the lights. I just felt that really neon green was too much, and too much the whole image, and it just wasn't realistic, even compared to the really stylized world of the image. So yeah, jumping back and forward, zooming in and out to fix the details, fix the lights. I'm trying to focus on the lighting mainly, because the light what gives us the objects, I mean the feel of the object, the feel of space. Without lights, there isn't anything. We can't see anything without lights. Just think about that. And I have a lot of light sources. I have two main light sources and two secondary ones. And I also have the reflective lights from the floor. And because I'm using a lot of shiny or semi-shiny materials, especially on the arms, these are just full of reflections. With the costume, I wanted to be really simple, so I didn't want it to go too overboard. First, I thought they could have a cape and that sort of thing, but then I realized then that I'm gonna lose the steampunk elements, or the importance of the steampunk elements and the faces, and I wanted to keep that as a primary thing. So I wanted to keep those as the most detailed and most intricate parts. As you can see, I spend a lot of time on the face, and I also spend a lot of time on the hands. If you keep focusing on the faces and hands, and you can paint that sort of realistic or sort of right, then generally the viewer's eye is going to believe that the whole image is right, or the whole character is right, even if you have small anatomical faults. The artist is going to recognize it, of course, but the artist not necessarily, because we see. So we just got used to seeing people's faces and people's hands. So those are the main parts of our gestures, the main parts of our communication. So that's why we always check, even on an illustration, we always check the faces and the hands first, unconsciously. So keep attention to the hands as well, not just the faces. And I'm moving to the other guy, doing exactly the same process, fixing the lights, bouncing lights, reflections, shadows all over him. Folds. Actually, this is I think the most boring part of an illustration process, but I still kind of like it because this is the point where the whole image comes to life. I'm also trying to, as you can see, I also trying to play with the various materials. For the materials, what you have to keep in mind is the reflective qualities of the materials. So, like for example, clothes or a shirt or a cotton shirt or a brass or leather has all of them has different reflective qualities and not just surface qualities. And the more variety you use in terms of materials, the more realistic your illustration is going to be. It's simple as that. If you just look around now and check your clothes, you're wearing at least 5, 6, 7 different materials in yourself. So try to vary the reflective qualities, then try to vary the surface qualities, try to vary the shapes of the accessories, and still keep in mind your light sources. It's slowly coming together. There's also a good thing to always check your silhouette. The silhouettes are what our eyes recognizes first. So always revise the silhouette of your characters. Try to correct them. I wanted to have really sharp silhouettes for my two main characters. It also helps us to put them into the focal point. And now I started to detail the gun. So I imagine the gun is his best buddy. So I wanted to give this gun as much love as it was possible. So as it's not a weapon design piece, it didn't need that much detail, but still, I wanted it to look like what's the right word? It's not reasonable, but to make it look like it could work. But the same goes to all the steampunk details: the gun, the boots, the power boots of the fat guy, and the arm of the captain. So it could work. these are things what you can imagine in a word. And I think these all fits together. That's the other key point. So all the accessories has to match to each other and to the whole word. And adding these small intricate details like the pattern on the gun, it's also or the skull on the knee. These are all helps to sell your story. These are all help to give another level of detail to your story and not just to your characters, not just to your illustration. Same goes to the boots. Everything just has to work. And yeah, it's pretty much ready. So I'm just pushing the highlights a bit more with the dodge tool, adding some extra textures, adding some extra key lights. Moving further, my characters are pretty much done. So I wanted to, with the bird, I wanted to give them a really exclusive look. So to differentiate that from the droids, from the simple droids. So I wanted to make it really brass looking, shiny. And first I wanted to create just a regular bird head, but then I realized, oh no, it could be much cooler to have like this almost like just a cylinder. So it's really simple. Its body is really intricate and its wings are really intricate, but it doesn't need much of a brain, so just a cylinder head. I'm going back, adding extra details to the characters, really zooming in, and small stuff, tattoos. Of course, if you're a pirate, you need tattoos. So there is like this love, rusty rat, dragon tattoo, or actually a tail of the dragon tattoo. So there's this turtle, what was originally used by fishermen. If you cross the equator, you can put a turtle tattoo on your arm. And I pretty much finished the characters, so I'm just going around in the foreground just to add another level of details, just to match everything to the characters. And I'm also detailing further the guy in the front, just to have him right. Just the lights, have him right, and I blur him a bit. And this gives me the sense of another level of space. So he's outside the focal point. He's just framing the illustration, just framing the main focal point, and it also feels that he's outside of focus. And this last step is basically when I'm fixing the lights, and I'm flattening down everything and fixing the saturation levels of the different space segments, adding a bit of contrast to my key areas. And so yeah, basically that's the finishing stage. So I'm pretty much ready with the detailing. I'm pretty much ready with all the parts what I wanted, and I'm doing another just on their gesture, just on their body proportions, some final fix, some corrections, adding a bit of aerial perspective, a bit of more moist to the air. Yeah, and jumping back and forward just to balance out the whole image. Adding some birds to the background as a last touch. Adding some motion blur to the birds and adding some reflections of the blue light of the drinks, some extra wines on top. So stuff like that, stuff like really what could finish the image. And what you see now is I give just another level of grunge, just another level of noise to the whole image. What could match to this whole steampunky feel and give a nice touch of finish to the whole illustration. So I'm just dropping these texture brushes and textures on top and on a really low opacity. I'm just putting it down on an overlay layers and grouping everything together, flattening down the whole image, and it's done. It's pretty much done. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this tutorial.